We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And welcome back to Liberty Nation Radio here on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. We're continuing our conversation with Liberty Nation senior political analyst Tim Donner. Earlier in the show, we were talking Robert F. Kennedy's impact by jumping ship to Donald Trump. We discussed a little bit, Tim, how there's been a bit of a shift in the parties, especially in terms of now the Republican Party seems more the party of the working class and the anti-war brigade, whereas that used to be very much a Democratic staple. And I'm wondering, Tim, and I think this is right, I might have it slightly wrong, but part of this is because Donald Trump himself was never really a Republican. Does that make sense?
He was always more of a Pat Buchanan, Ross Perot style gadfly, outsider independent, who simply realized that he had to be candidate of one of the two major parties if he actually wanted to become president. And a lot of people will say, well, he changed his position on a lot of things, but what informed that was the fact that Donald Trump operated in the Manhattan political climate for his entire business career. And if you operate in Manhattan, which is roughly 92% Democratic, you can't be an outspoken conservative. You can't be pro-life. You can't be against tax hikes and that sort of thing. So he sort of played along because he had to for business. But I think nobody questions the sincerity of his views now since 2016. And for example, something like the pro-life position, and we're getting off on a bit of a tangent, but the pro-life position is something where he is not a believing Christian like most pro-life people, but believing Christians believe that he will protect them, believes that he will protect the pro-life position as he did. So obviously by naming 3 justices to the Supreme Court who ultimately contributed to the overturning of Roe versus Wade.
Yeah, it's I don't think anybody could really doubt his bona fides. I mean, he really has gone to the wall for what I think what many people were looking for in a conservative, what many conservatives were looking for in a Republican, because conservative and Republican aren't necessarily the same thing. And it seems that there's been this massive reshaping of the party, but that many within those parties haven't quite realized what we on the outside can see taking shape. And do you think that's because there's almost an innate instinct to preserve what the party is that they joined? I mean, we have seen some people jump ship, obviously Robert F. Kennedy being the main one there, but we've also seen from the Republican side, we've seen Adam Kinzinger go full Democrat, as it were. But then you also have somebody like Tulsi Gabbard, who's a Democrat, who's saying some very positive things about the Trump campaign. And it seems people are trying to realign themselves. And I'm hoping, just for the sake of political honesty across all sides, that what we'll see is people will change sides based on their positions, based on their genuinely held beliefs, rather than party rhetoric that, as you pointed out, for example, Trump in Manhattan had to claim.
Mm-hmm.
What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you can see mostly from anecdotal evidence, but also with polling, which now has to be redone because, of course, Kamala Harris is a very different candidate demographically than Joe Biden. So I think we need to revisit the idea of the minority vote as we get towards the middle to end of September to see how it's playing out, because that was one of the big losses that Joe Biden suffered. Now, that could potentially contribute at least to a realignment of the parties. But I mean, make no mistake, the most remarkable thing about Donald Trump is that and what makes him a unique figure in American history was that he single-handedly took a party of the rich and elite plutocrats like Mitt Romney, who was a candidate as recently as 2012, who was largely beaten because he was seen as a plutocrat and a rich elite.
Yeah, I'll bet you $10,000.
And Donald Trump single-handedly turned the party in an entirely different direction. Now, of course, he kept some things the same. He still believes in the same libertarian principles and low taxes and the like that are the sort of the mother's milk of conservative thought. But at the same time, he just took the party, dragged them kicking and screaming into his own image. And I don't think you can say anybody has ever accomplished that single-handedly before. You might say FDR, the New Deal, but that was an emergency situation, and the Democrats were already headed in a leftist direction. So you could probably point to some other places in history where a single man made a significant difference. Teddy Roosevelt, for example, took the Republican Party into the direction of trustbusters, antitrust, anti-big corporations. U.S. Steel, for example, the steel monopoly. But, for the most part, Donald Trump has achieved something nobody could have ever imagined. Now, the question is the party that he created from whole cloth, single-handedly, is that the party that we'll have after this election? Because I guarantee you, if Donald Trump loses, the party will not go in a MAGA direction. A safer strategy with someone like a Nikki Haley, as the Democrats will have pitched their tent on the extreme left, having won 4 elections by progressives out of the last 5, 2 terms of Obama plus Biden plus Harris, establishes clearly a progressive era. But, and this is the stakes here, if Trump wins, we largely will see the end of the progressive era. I mean, that's how huge the stakes are, just objectively in terms of the difference between a Harris victory and a Trump victory. I mean, you can say the stakes are greater than ever, but I think the bookends of the possible outcomes are more extreme than ever before.
And that's what we'll be finding out as we get closer to the election. We'll be back with Tim Donner talking Kamala Harris. Don't go anywhere.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.